This is the Tesla Model Y Performance. It's just been released here in Australia for the first time, and one thing Aussies love to do with their SUVs is take road trips. So in today's video, we're going to see exactly how far the Model Y Performance can travel on the highway. We're going to head south out of Sydney to Goulburn and then turn around and head back to Australia's fastest Tesla supercharger, which is here in Sydney, to see exactly how many Ks you're going to get out of a charge from the Model Y Performance on the highway. Of course, we're starting with a battery which has been brimmed at 100%. The car's predicting 477 Ks of range. Tesla's claim is 514 Ks. Let's see what you get in the real world. As you can see, pleasant day here in Australia. It's about 22 degrees, perfect conditions for a range test. So let's get into it now. So in the past, I've done a range test of the Model Y rear-wheel drive model using the same loop as what I'm using today, and we found that car came a bit short of its official WLTP range claim, and you can find that video on the channel. Very keen to do the same test today though in the Model Y Performance. On paper, this car looks like really good value, and the range claim being in the 500s WLTP is definitely impressive and suitable for buyers here in Australia. This is a big country with long distances, and my personal belief is that when an EV starts talking about having 500 Ks of range, it becomes really useful for Aussie road trips. So very keen to see what the actual number will be today. So in terms of this route, let me explain to you how this range test kind of comes together. So at Chasing Cars, our head office is in Sydney, which is the biggest city in Australia, and Sydney is in a basin. So every direction out of the city to go on a holiday or whatever you're doing, you have to climb up and out of Sydney to do that, whether you're going south, west, or north. There's obviously nowhere to go east because that's the Pacific Ocean. So we've gone south today into the Southern Highlands to a big country town called Goulburn, and that's a long climb up to Goulburn. But then what we're doing is we're going to say hello to the Tesla superchargers at Goulburn. We're not actually going to plug in, and then we're going to head right on back to Sydney and enjoy the benefits of going back down the hill. So it effectively ends up being a pretty even test in that regard. So some observations. I've now been driving for, let's see, 150 Ks. It's been dry for the most part. As you can see, there's a little bit of light rain falling at the moment, but not enough to really significantly distort a test like this. And what I'm finding is that the Model Y Performance is a really lovely highway cruiser. Not only does it have an incredible amount of pace for if you want to merge onto a highway on-ramp really fast or overtake a truck quickly and safely, but the car just sits really pleasantly on the highway. The upgraded suspension definitely delivers a more even high-speed ride. I'll save my comments about the urban ride for my full review of the Model Y Performance, so subscribe in order to see that. But on the highway, this car has a really nice demeanor. This particular vehicle is not optioned with enhanced autopilot or full self-driving, which is, a possible future release here in Australia. It's just got the basic system. The autopilot works pretty smoothly. The auto steer function is okay. There are some rival systems that I think are just as good in terms of lane centering, but as I mentioned, this car doesn't have things like enhanced autopilot, so I can't talk about the special features that you get when you buy that. I think it's interesting that Tesla doesn't option its own cars with that level of tech, so instead we just have the basics to look at here. It's a pretty mild and temperate day today. It's ranged from 26 degrees to 17 degrees based on our elevation. It's mostly cloudy, so we don't have a huge amount of sun baking in through this glass roof. I have driven a bunch of Teslas on road trips in the past, Model 3s and a rear drive Model Y, where I've felt my head heating up a little bit on a really sunny summer's day. I know some people like to put shades on their car and that sort of thing if that's a problem, but it's worth noting that you can't get this car without the glass roof. Likewise, the seat trim is vinyl. That's not a problem today, but in hot weather, I've found myself getting pretty sweaty on vinyl because it's not a breathable fabric. So in particular, there's a Model 3 long range I'm thinking of, which had a pretty sweaty seat, but I'd probably go for the white interior, which is going to reflect a lot of light. And because it is vinyl, it's just wipe clean, so you don't really have to worry too much about dye transfer, which is a good thing. Phenomenal stereo though. Tesla are very, very good at stereos. It's crisp, it's clear, it's pretty well balanced in this car. You've obviously got all your information in this screen in the center here. For me, that works absolutely fine. You do have to keep kind of glancing at your speed if you're not using adaptive cruise control, of course. It would be nice to have a heads-up display for sure. I know a lot of people do aftermarket solutions for that. Hopefully Tesla just includes a little speedometer in front of you in future, but I think it's one of those features that you definitely get used to. So anyway, we're pretty close to arriving at Goulburn, which is our halfway point, our turnaround point. Once we get there, I'm going to let you know what our consumption was for the first leg, which, as I mentioned, is more of an uphill leg, and then we'll see how much better we can do on the way back to Sydney, where we're going to get our final range test number for the Tesla Model Y Performance. So we're now here at Goulburn, our turnaround point. There's a great supercharger down here. We're not charging, but we're also not blocking it right now. It's in very light use on this middle of a weekday. So how is the consumption? Well, going up the hill, we've managed 19.2 kilowatt hours per 100 Ks in the Model Y. So obviously we're now going to go back to Sydney and we're going to get a figure which represents the average of the two journeys. And that's important because at this kind of consumption, with the Model Y Performance's 75 kilowatt hour usable battery, the current trip would mean that it has a complete range of 390 Ks. I'm sure we'll do better than that on the way back to Sydney, and then we'll get that final figure at the other end when we're going to charge this car up at the Kirrawee Supercharger. Well, we're about halfway back to Sydney now. Still cloudy, tiny bits of rain here and there, and as expected, because of the nature of this route, our efficiency is improving. Total efficiency for the trip so far, 303 Ks. We've used 55 kilowatt hours of the 75 kilowatt hour battery, so we're averaging 18.0 kilowatt hours per 100 Ks. Now, if it stayed like that, the range would be about 420. I reckon we're going to eke out a bit more of an improvement again though. So onward to the supercharger just south of the city in Sydney, and we'll see how the Model Y Performance goes. So we're now here at Tesla's superchargers at Kirrawee, south of the Sydney city. The results were as expected. We were much more efficient on the way back from Goulburn to here in Sydney. In fact, considerably so, and our final efficiency for the trip, 17.2 kilowatt hours per 100 Ks over nearly 400 kilometers of driving. But what does that mean in terms of range? Well, real world range for this vehicle on the highway is 436 kilometers. Some way short of the WLTP claim of 514, but still really usable. And that now takes us on to the next part of our test, which is recharging. So as you know, as part of the Chasing Cars recharging test, we recharge from 50 to 350 Ks of real world highway range, which for this car is 11% to 80%. We're going to time it and then see how the Model Y Performance ranks against its rivals like the Genesis GV60 Performance and even things like the Porsche Taycan. So that's our highway range and recharging test of the 2023 Tesla Model Y Performance. Not a bad job. Some cars exceed their WLTP claim, some don't manage to make it. The Model Y Performance has ended up about where I expected it to be, and 436 Ks of range on the highway is pretty respectable here in Australia when you consider the breadth of the supercharger network and also the other public networks being installed at decent intervals on many trunk routes in Australia, although not generally in the interior of our continent. As for the recharging test, just over 31 minutes makes this car a lot quicker to recharge on the highway than something like a Volvo C40, but also a lot slower than 800 volt cars like the Kia EV6, the Porsche Taycan or the Genesis GV60, all of which can do it in under 20 minutes. So that's interesting. I'm very keen to know your data points though from having your Model Y Performance out in the real world. Let me know what you're getting on the highway down here or in town. While you're there, hit subscribe to Chasing Cars if you want to see more range tests. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss our videos. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.